a music mogul, was searching for the next big voice, but living in emptiness. She, pregnant and abandoned, sang in the park to survive. He sees her. Pietra's voice and vulnerability captivated him. Her image struck him deeply. Against his cynical nature, the producer fell for her essence, her courage, and the purity of her art. Prepare for a twist where society in the past tried to destroy the mogul's love for the pregnant singer. But the strength of that love and the purity of her art can heal all wounds. Watch this story to the end. You'll be amazed. If you like stories of love and romance, subscribe to this channel, leave a comment. We post videos like this every day. Moving on, the midday sun beat down relentlessly on Washington Square Park in New York City. Pietra Mendes adjusted her guitar in her trembling hands, trying to ignore the twinges in her lower back that her 7-month pregnancy made increasingly intense. Her navy blue dress, already faded from washing, stretched over her prominent belly, and she felt the curious gazes of the passers-by hurrying past. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and let the first note spring from her throat. Her voice came out clear, filled with a melancholy that seemed to come from far beyond her 26 years. It was a song she had composed herself, born from sleepless nights in her small rented apartment, when the baby moved and she hummed to soothe him, trying also to soothe her own broken heart. When the world collapses around us, there's still a song left. The words flowed naturally, enveloping the passers-by like an invisible embrace. Some people stopped, threw coins into the shoebox at her feet, but Pietra barely noticed. Singing was her refuge, the only thing that kept her standing since Rodrigo had left, taking with him all the promises of the future and leaving only the echo of "I'm not ready to be a dad" echoing through the empty corridors of her life. Across town, Gabriel Sterling was finishing another tense meeting in his office at the top of the mirrored building that housed Sterling Music Group. At 45, he had built a music empire that discovered and shaped the country's biggest talents. His mahogany desk was filled with million-dollar contracts, but Gabriel felt a deep weariness that money couldn't cure. "Mr. Sterling, the meeting with the record label executives has been rescheduled for tomorrow," announced his assistant Caroline, peeking through the half-open door. Gabriel nodded distractedly, his eyes fixed on the panoramic view of the city. He had discovered dozens of artists, turned voices into fortunes, but lately everything seemed artificial, calculated. The singers came to him with their voices tuned by computer programs, their personalities shaped by image consultants. Where was the soul of the music? Where was the truth? "Cancel my appointments for the afternoon," he decided suddenly, rising from his chair. "I need some fresh air." Caroline looked at him in surprise. In 15 years as his assistant, she had rarely seen Gabriel leave the office before 8 in the evening. Gabriel went down to the garage, where his collection of imported cars awaited him. But today, he didn't want the isolation of bulletproof glass and air conditioning. He grabbed the keys to his sports bike, a red Ducati that he rarely used, and drove out into the streets of New York City without a specific destination. The traffic forced him to stop at a traffic light near Washington Square Park. That's when he heard her. A voice, unlike anything he had heard in recent years, cut through the roar of engines and angry horns. Gabriel turned off the motorcycle and stood still mounted, trying to locate the origin of that sound that seemed to come from another world. He followed the sound on foot, leaving the motorcycle parked illegally. As he approached, the voice became clearer, more engaging, and then he saw her, a young pregnant woman sitting on an improvised stool, singing with an intensity that made people stop in the middle of their daily rush. Her face, though marked by fatigue, radiated a natural beauty that no makeup studio could reproduce. Gabriel positioned himself behind a tree, watching, fascinated. Pietra sang as if her life depended on those notes, as if each word were a prayer. There was a raw truth, an authenticity that he had sought in luxurious audition rooms and never found. It was exactly what his soul, hardened by years of business, had forgotten existed. When Pietra finished the song, a small group of people applauded, and some put money in her box. Gabriel saw how she thanked them with a genuine smile, even with tears in her eyes. There was a dignity in her that touched him deeply. He was about to approach when he saw a park ranger heading towards Pietra with a stern expression. "Ma'am, you can't be here singing without a permit," said the uniformed man, gesturing for her to leave. Pietra began to gather her belongings with trembling hands, clearly frightened. Gabriel felt an inexplicable urge to protect her. Without thinking twice, he crossed the park and approached. "Excuse me," Gabriel said, with the firm voice he usually used in important negotiations. "Is there a problem?" The ranger looked him up and down, noting the expensive clothes and the imposing posture. "The lady was singing without permission. It's not allowed." Gabriel took out his wallet and discreetly showed some documents that guaranteed enough influence to resolve the situation. "I'm sure we can come to an understanding," he said, placing some bills in the man's hand. "Music is a cultural heritage, isn't it?" The ranger pocketed the money and walked away without further questioning. Gabriel turned to Pietra, who was looking at him with a mixture of gratitude and suspicion. "Thank you," she murmured, still kneeling, picking up the scattered coins. "But you didn't have to do that." "I couldn't stand by and watch your art being censored," Gabriel replied, crouching down to help her up. "Your voice is extraordinary." Pietra studied his face, noting the sincerity in his dark eyes. There was something about him that made her feel truly seen, not just observed. "I'm Gabriel Sterling," he introduced himself, offering his hand. The name echoed in Pietra's mind like thunder. Everyone in the United States knew Gabriel Sterling, the music mogul, the man who discovered stars and turned them into icons. What was he doing there, in the park, talking to her? "Pietra," she managed to answer, accepting his hand. "Pietra," he repeated, as if savoring the name. "You have an extraordinary gift. May I invite you for a coffee? I'd like to talk about your music." Pietra hesitated, her hands instinctively protecting her belly. She had heard too many stories about powerful men who promised dreams and delivered nightmares. I don't know if that's a good idea," she murmured, looking away. Gabriel sensed her reluctance and took a step back, respecting her space. "I understand your caution. I can imagine you've heard a lot of empty promises." He took a card out of his pocket, but didn't extend it immediately. "I'm not here as a businessman looking for profit. I'm here as someone who has just rediscovered what real music is." The sincerity in his voice made Pietra look at him again. There was something about Gabriel that contrasted with the image she had of the rich and powerful, a hidden melancholy, a genuine search for something he seemed to have lost. "Look, I know you don't know me," Gabriel continued, "but I've been working in music for over 20 years. I've heard thousands of voices, and I can say yours is special. You don't have to trust me now, but at least accept this." He placed the card in her coin box along with several bills. "When you're ready, if you're ready, give me a call." Pietra picked up the card with trembling fingers. The paper was thick, elegant, with his name in gold letters. The reality of the situation hit her like a wave. Gabriel Sterling, the Gabriel Sterling, had stopped to listen to her sing. "Why me?" she asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. Gabriel studied her for a moment, seeing beyond the pregnancy, beyond the simple clothes, beyond the obvious vulnerability. "Because when you sing, it's like the world stops, because there's a truth in your voice that can't be taught or bought. And because..." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Because it's been a long time since someone reminded me why I fell in love with music." A gentle contraction made Pietra lean on the stool, and Gabriel immediately approached, concerned. "Are you okay?" "Yes, it's normal," she replied, but Gabriel noticed how she disguised the discomfort. "The baby is just moving a lot today." "You should be resting, not singing on the street in this sun," he said, genuinely worried. The observation touched on an open wound. "I don't have a choice," Pietra replied with a bitterness she tried to hide. "I need the money. The baby is due in 2 months and Her voice trailed off. Gabriel felt a pang in his chest. Her strength and fragility were devastating. "Sorry, I didn't mean to sound condescending. It's just, you shouldn't have to go through this alone." "But I am alone," she said simply, a tear escaping despite her effort to stay strong. At that moment, Gabriel made a decision that would change everything. He took his phone out of his pocket and made a quick call. "Caroline, I want you to find the best OB/GYN in New York City and make an appointment for today. Emergency." He looked at Pietra. "And arrange a driver with a comfortable car." "What are you doing?" Pietra asked, alarmed. "Making sure you and your baby receive the care you deserve," Gabriel replied, putting the phone away. "No commitments, no contracts, just what any decent human being would do." "I can't accept this," Pietra protested, even knowing that she hadn't seen a doctor in weeks for lack of money. "You're not accepting charity," Gabriel said firmly. "You're allowing someone to take care of two extraordinary people." The way he said extraordinary, including the baby who hadn't even been born, made Pietra's heart race in a way she hadn't felt in months. Before she could protest again, a black car pulled up to the curb. The driver got out and opened the back door respectfully. "Dr. Thompson is the best OB/GYN in the city," Gabriel explained. "She has already confirmed that she can see you in an hour." Pietra looked at the car, then at Gabriel, then at the box with the few coins she had earned. Logic told her to be wary, but something deeper, an intuition she had learned to trust, whispered that this man was different. "And after the appointment?" she asked, still hesitant. "After, if you want. We'll talk about music. No pressure, no contracts, just two people who love art talking about it." Pietra felt another contraction, stronger this time, and that decided it for her. "Okay," she said, accepting the hand Gabriel offered to help her up. In the car, as they drove through the New York City traffic, Gabriel watched Pietra in the rearview mirror. She kept a protective hand on her belly, looking out the window with an expression that mixed hope and fear. There was a strength in her that impressed him, a woman who faced motherhood alone and still found the courage to sing her pain in the public square. "Can I ask about the baby's father?" Gabriel heard himself saying, immediately regretting the indiscretion. Pietra stiffened. "He decided he wasn't ready to be a father when he found out about the pregnancy, said I was trying to trap him." Her voice was controlled, but Gabriel perceived the deep pain behind the words. "I'm sorry," he said, genuinely touched. "Don't be," Pietra replied, looking him directly in the eye in the rearview mirror. "I'd rather raise my child alone than with someone who doesn't want us." The force of that statement hit Gabriel like a punch. That woman, even abandoned and vulnerable, kept her dignity intact. She was a human fortress, disguised as fragility. Arriving at the doctor's office, Gabriel waited in the waiting room while Pietra went through the consultation. When she came out, she was carrying a series of tests and a relieved expression. "Everything's okay with both of us," she said, smiling for the first time since they met. "Both of you," Gabriel repeated, and something in his chest warmed as he realized how she always included the baby in everything. In the elegant coffee shop where Gabriel took her next, Pietra felt completely out of place among the well-dressed executives and the whispered business meetings. Gabriel noticed her discomfort. "We can go somewhere else if you prefer," he offered. "No, it's okay," Pietra lied, trying to ignore the curious glances directed at her belly and her simple clothes. They talked about music, about delayed dreams, about the industry that Gabriel knew inside and out, and that Pietra had only observed from afar. The more they talked, the more Gabriel became convinced that he had found something rare, not just an exceptional voice, but a genuine soul in a world of facades. "I want to help you," Gabriel said as the afternoon wore on. "Professionally, I mean. You have enough talent to conquer the world." "And personally?" asked Pietra, surprising herself with the boldness. Gabriel was silent for a long moment. "Personally, I don't know if I'm the right person to be in the life of someone like you. Someone like me, someone genuine, someone who deserves more than I can offer." Before Pietra could answer, Gabriel's phone rang insistently. It was Caroline, her voice agitated. "Mr. Sterling, you need to come back urgently. Information about the confidential contract with the American singer has been leaked. The press is downstairs and the investors are furious." Gabriel closed his eyes, the real world brutally intruding on that afternoon of discoveries. "I have to go," he said to Pietra, genuinely regretful. "But this isn't over." He called another car to take her safely home, but as Pietra was about to get into the vehicle, she turned around. "Gabriel, thank you for seeing me, for really seeing me." As the car drove away, Gabriel stood on the sidewalk, feeling as if a part of him was leaving too. At that moment, his phone vibrated with a message from Caroline. "The press found out you left the office today. They're speculating about where you were. Be careful." Gabriel looked at the message and then at the street where Pietra had disappeared. For the first time in years, he had found someone that really mattered, and he could already feel his world trying to destroy that possibility before it even had a chance to blossom. 3 days had passed since the encounter in the park, and Gabriel couldn't concentrate on anything. During important meetings, his mind wandered to Pietra's voice. During auditions with new talents, he compared each performance with the devastating authenticity of that afternoon. Caroline began to notice his distraction and make subtle comments about his recent lack of focus. On Thursday morning, Gabriel made an impulsive decision. He cancelled all appointments and drove to Washington Square Park, hoping to find Pietra again. But she wasn't there. He returned at lunchtime, then in the late afternoon. Nothing. The frustration he felt was disproportionate. After all, he barely knew that woman, but there was something in her that had awakened a part of himself that he believed to be dead. Pietra, on the other hand, had spent the same 3 days fighting the temptation to call Gabriel. His card was on her small bedside table, already crumpled from being handled so much. The medical consultation had revealed that she needed rest. But rest meant not singing in the park, and not singing meant not having money for the rent that was due in a week. On Friday afternoon, hunger won over pride. Pietra went down to the park, even against medical advice. She had barely started the first song when Gabriel appeared, as if he had a radar tuned to her voice. "You shouldn't be here," he said, approaching with quick steps. "The doctor said you need rest." "How do you know what the doctor said?" Pietra asked, defensively. "I paid for the consultation. I have a right to know if the money was well spent," Gabriel replied, then immediately regretted the tone. "Sorry, that came out wrong. I care about you, that's all." The raw honesty in his voice disarmed Pietra. "I need the money, Gabriel. The rent is due Monday and I don't have even half the amount." Gabriel felt a stab in his chest. How had he been so blind as not to notice the desperation behind the music? "How much do you need?" "No," Pietra said firmly. "I'm not going to accept charity." What if it wasn't charity? What if it was an advance? Advance on what? Gabriel took a deep breath. "I want you to record a demo, one of your songs, sung like you sang in the park. If it works out, we can talk about a contract. If it doesn't, at least you'll have your rent paid." Pietra studied him intently. "Why are you doing this? What do you get out of all this?" The question caught him off guard. For a moment, Gabriel struggled against the urge to be completely honest. "Maybe because I haven't felt like I'm doing something that really matters in a long time." They went to Gabriel's private studio, located in the basement of his mansion in Beverly Hills. Pietra was impressed with the sophistication of the equipment, but even more so with the simplicity with which Gabriel treated her. No rush, no pressure, letting her feel comfortable. "Sing whatever you want," he said, adjusting the microphones. As if you were alone. Pietra closed her eyes and began to sing a song she had composed the night before about finding light in the darkness. Her voice filled the studio with an intensity that made Gabriel forget to breathe. When she finished, a reverent silence filled the room. "That was perfect," whispered Gabriel. "Do you say that to all your artists?" Pietra asked, trying to keep her tone light, but her eyes revealed how his approval mattered. I don't have artists, I have products, Gabriel replied, surprising himself with the brutal honesty. You're the first person in years who has made me remember the difference. They spent the next few hours in the studio, Gabriel showing Pietra how the equipment worked, she singing fragments of melodies that were born spontaneously. There was a growing intimacy between them, a mutual understanding that transcended words. When it began to get dark, Gabriel offered dinner. Pietra accepted, but asked for something simple. They sat in the kitchen of the mansion, a more welcoming environment than the formal dining room, eating sandwiches that Gabriel himself prepared. You cook? Pietra asked, impressed. I've lived alone most of my life, Gabriel replied. I learned out of necessity. Have you always been alone? Gabriel hesitated, stirring his sandwich without eating. I used to be married, a long time ago. What happened? She said I loved music more than her. Maybe she was right. His voice carried an old pain, carefully hidden. Isabella is a singer too. We met when she was a beginner. I turned her into an international star, and in the process, we lost each other. Pietra realized that there were deeper layers to that story. Do you have children? The silence that followed was deafening. Gabriel stood up abruptly, starting to collect the plates. No. Gabriel, Isabella got pregnant, he said with his back to her, his voice tight. But she chose her career, said a baby would ruin everything we had built together. He turned around, his eyes shining with a poorly healed pain. I wanted that baby more than any professional success. But she made the decision alone, and then blamed me for not supporting her. Pietra felt the air escape from her lungs. Suddenly, she understood why Gabriel had stopped in the park, why he was helping her, why he looked at her belly with that mixture of fascination and melancholy. That's why you... she began. No. Gabriel interrupted quickly, realizing how his confession might sound. It's not because of that, or it's not only because of that. He approached her again. You're extraordinary, Pietra, with or without the pregnancy. Your voice, your strength, your ability to find beauty even in pain. He stopped talking when he realized he was getting too close, that the space between them had become charged with a tension that went beyond music or compassion. Pietra looked him in the eye and saw a man who had lost more than she had imagined, a man who understood the pain of losing something before even having it. Gabriel, she whispered, and for a moment, both leaned slightly towards each other. The buzz of the intercom startled them. Gabriel answered with an agitated voice. Mr. Sterling, the press is out front. Someone told them you were with a mysterious pregnant singer. They're asking for statements. Gabriel and Pietra looked at each other, reality brutally invading that moment of connection. Gabriel's world had found them, and Pietra realized with a heavy heart that her simple and anonymous life was about to become much more complicated. I need to get you out of here, said Gabriel, already calculating escape routes. Where to? Asked Pietra, but the answer that was coming would change everything between them. Gabriel led Pietra quickly through the back of the mansion, avoiding the front windows where the flashes of photographers cut through the night like furious stars. My car is in the back garage, he explained, guiding her through a corridor she didn't even know existed. Gabriel, this is getting too complicated, said Pietra, breathless. Maybe it's better if I leave and... She didn't finish the sentence. A sharp pain pierced her abdomen, much more intense than the mild contractions of the last few days. Pietra doubled over, leaning against the wall, a moan escaping her lips. Pietra! Gabriel supported her immediately, feeling her tremble in his arms. What's happening? I don't know, she whispered, her face pale. It hurts much more than normal. Another contraction hit her, even stronger, and this time Pietra couldn't contain the scream. Gabriel felt the panic take over him. We're going to the hospital, now. I can't leave here with you, Pietra protested between the pains. The photographers will... Screw the photographers, Gabriel said with a firmness that allowed no discussion. He picked her up in his arms, ignoring her protests, and carried her to the garage. On the way to the hospital, Gabriel drove like a man possessed, one hand on the wheel and the other holding Pietra's, who writhed in pain in the passenger seat. "Everything will be okay," he repeated, more to himself than to her. "You and the baby will be fine." "Gabriel," Pietra managed to say between contractions, "if anything happens to me, nothing's going to happen." "If it does," she insisted, squeezing his hand, "promise me you'll take care of my baby. Don't let him go to an orphanage." The question hit Gabriel like lightning. He looked at her, that courageous woman who, even in the midst of pain and fear, thought only of her son's well-being, and felt something break definitively inside his chest. "I promise," he said, his voice choked, "but it won't be necessary. You're going to raise your son. And He hesitated. "I'll be here to help if you let me." At the hospital, Gabriel used all his influence to ensure that Pietra received the best care. He filled out forms, authorized procedures, and stayed by her side during every exam. For all intents and purposes, he was acting as if he were the baby's father. Dr. Thompson, the OB-GYN, who had consulted Pietra days before, arrived quickly and performed a thorough evaluation. After long hours of tests and monitoring, he emerged from the room with a relieved smile. "It was a false alarm, but an important one," he explained. "Braxton Hicks contractions intensified by stress. The baby is fine, but Pietra needs absolute rest. No strenuous activities, no stress. The pregnancy is on the edge." Gabriel felt the relief wash over him, but also an iron determination. "She'll get all the rest she needs." When they returned to the mansion in the early hours of the morning, the paparazzi had dispersed, but Gabriel knew they would be back. Pietra was exhausted, barely able to stand. "I can't go home," she murmured. "The neighbors will ask questions if they see me arriving in a car like yours." "Then you're not going home," Gabriel decided. "You're staying here." "Gabriel, I barely know you. And I barely know you either," he admitted, carefully carrying her to the guest room. "But tonight, you almost lost your baby, and I almost lost—" He stopped, realizing what he was about to say. "Almost lost what?" Gabriel gently laid her on the bed, covering her with a soft duvet. "The most precious thing I've found in years." Pietra watched him as he adjusted the pillows, noting how his hands trembled slightly. "You're scared," she realized. "I am," Gabriel admitted, sitting on the edge of the bed. "I'm afraid you'll disappear. I'm afraid this is just a dream. And I'm afraid of—" He stopped again. "Of what?" "Of falling in love with both of you and finding out that I'm not strong enough to protect you." The confession hung in the air between them like a fragile bridge over an abyss. Pietra reached out, touching his face lightly. "You saved our lives today." "Anyone would have done the same." "No," she said softly. "Anyone would have called an ambulance and left. You stayed. You promised to take care of my son if I died. You brought me to your house." Gabriel covered her hand with his. "Pietra, you need to know that if you stay here, things will get complicated. My life is public. The reporters will make up stories." "What kind of stories?" Gabriel hesitated. "They'll say you're trying to blackmail me, that you're after my money. They'll investigate your past. They'll try to find dirt where there is none. And my family—" He paused for a long time. "They won't accept you easily." "Why not?" "Because you don't fit the mold they created for me. Because you're too real, too genuine. And because—" Gabriel stood up, walking to the window. "Because there are things about my past that they prefer to keep buried." Pietra propped herself up on her elbows, ignoring the discomfort. "What kind of things?" Gabriel was silent for a long moment, looking at the illuminated garden. "My first love wasn't Isabella. It was a girl I met when I was 22. Marina. She was like simple, genuine, full of dreams." His voice became distant. "My family systematically destroyed her. They spread lies about her, sabotaged her job opportunities until she couldn't take it anymore and left town." Pietra felt a chill down her spine. "What happened to her?" I never saw her again. I heard years later that she had married a man in another city, trying to forget what we lived through. Gabriel turned to her, his eyes full of regret. I swore I would never allow anyone to hurt someone I loved again, but I also never allowed anyone to get close enough to run that risk. Until now, Pietra said softly. Until now. The silence that followed was filled with the weight of the confessions and the awareness that they were crossing a line they couldn't undo. Gabriel approached again, kneeling beside the bed. If you stay, Pietra, I will protect you and your baby with everything I have. But you need to know that it will be a war. My family, the competitors, the press, everyone will try to separate us. Pietra looked at him for a long moment, seeing beyond the power and wealth, seeing the man who had lost a lot and who was now willing to risk everything again. What if I don't want your protection? What if I want to fight alongside you? The question caught Gabriel by surprise. You can barely stand. You need rest. Don't underestimate me, Pietra said, a new determination shining in her eyes. I've survived this far alone. If we're going to face this together, then we face it as partners, not as protector and protected. Gabriel smiled for the first time in days, a genuine smile that completely transformed his face. You're stronger than I imagined, and you're more human than your reputation suggests. They looked into each other's eyes, and they both knew that they had crossed a point of no return. It no longer mattered the social differences, the obstacles, or the dangers. Something had been born between them in those last few hours, something that was worth any fight. Gabriel's phone rang, interrupting the moment. It was Caroline, her voice tense. Gabriel, we need to talk. Your mother found out about the girl. She's coming to New York tomorrow, and she's furious. Gabriel looked at Pietra, who had overheard the conversation. She nodded, understanding that the battle was just beginning. Let her come, Gabriel replied, not taking his eyes off Pietra. We have a lot to talk about. The next morning, Pietra woke up to the aroma of coffee and the sound of tense voices coming from downstairs. She got up carefully, following the sound until she found Gabriel in the living room, wearing an impeccable suit, but with the darkest expression she had ever seen on him. Mom, you can't just show up here and make demands, Gabriel was saying on the phone, his voice controlled but icy. Pietra hesitated at the door, not knowing if she should retreat, when Gabriel saw her and gestured for her to come closer. He put the phone on speakerphone. I won't tolerate you destroying decades of work for the sake of some opportunist. The female and authoritative voice of Helena Sterling cut through the air like a blade. I've already had the girl investigated. Do you know what I found out? Gabriel stiffened. Mum, she has a history of problematic relationships. The baby's father ran away because she tried to extort him, and now she's doing the same thing to you. That's a lie, Gabriel said firmly, but Pietra saw the momentary doubt that flashed through his eyes. I have the evidence, Gabriel. WhatsApp conversations, witnesses. The girl is calculating. And if you don't get rid of her voluntarily, I will make all of this public. Pietra's blood ran cold. She knew they were lies. She had never extorted Rodrigo. He had simply run away when he found out about the pregnancy. But she also knew how easy it was to distort facts when you had enough money and influence. You have 48 hours, Helena continued. Either she disappears from your life, or I'll make sure she disappears from the life of any decent person in this city. Gabriel hung up the phone forcefully, his face red with anger. Pietra, you know that none of that is true, right? But when he turned to her, Pietra was pale, her hands trembling. Gabriel, there's something I need to tell you. No, he said immediately. I don't care what my mother said she found out. Nothing from your past changes what I feel for you. But it should change, Pietra whispered, tears starting to flow. Because I lied to you. Gabriel felt the ground shift beneath his feet. What do you mean? Pietra sat down heavily on the sofa, her hands covering her face. My real name isn't Pietra Mendez, she said, her voice barely more than a whisper. It's Pietra Santos. Santos as in Eduardo Santos. Gabriel frowned. Eduardo Santos. The congressman? My father. The words came out like a confession torn by force. The same Eduardo Santos, who is being investigated for corruption, who is involved in the biggest political scandal of recent years. The revelation hit Gabriel like a tsunami. Eduardo Santos was one of the most controversial politicians in the country, involved in money laundering schemes that splashed various sectors, including entertainment. Gabriel had struggled to keep his company away from that scandal. Rodrigo found out and said he couldn't stay with me because it would ruin his career in law. Pietra continued, sobbing. I changed my last name. I distanced myself from my family when the scandals began. I thought I could have a normal life, but your mother found out, Gabriel completed, understanding the situation with terrible clarity. She must have private investigators. She must know everything. Pietra looked at him with despair. Gabriel, I never wanted you to get involved in this. If the reporters find out that you're helping the daughter of Eduardo Santos, Gabriel started pacing back and forth, his mind working quickly. Sterling Music Group had government contracts for cultural events. If it was revealed that he was romantically involved with the daughter of Eduardo Santos, in the midst of a corruption scandal, it would be a financial and reputational disaster. That's why you were singing in the park, he said, the pieces falling into place. You couldn't look for work with your real name. Exactly. Any employer who did a background check would find out who I am. Gabriel's phone rang again. This time it was Caroline. Gabriel, the situation has gotten worse. Someone leaked to the press that you spent the night with an unknown woman. And there's more. They're saying that she may be involved with the Santos scandal. Gabriel and Pietra looked at each other, both understanding that the net was closing faster than they imagined. How did they find out? Gabriel asked. I don't know, but there are reporters from 3 networks down here, and we received an anonymous call saying that they're going to release photos of the 2 of you entering the hospital last night if you don't give a statement by Monday. Gabriel hung up and turned to Pietra, who was crying silently. I'm leaving, she said. I can't let you lose everything because of me. No, Gabriel said, surprising himself with the firmness of his own voice. I'm not going to let you face this alone. Gabriel, you don't understand. If they stay with me, they'll destroy your company, your reputation. And if I let you leave, they'll destroy you and your baby, Gabriel replied. At least together we have a chance to fight. Pietra looked at him through her tears. Why? Why would you do this? Gabriel knelt before her, taking her hands. Because in 3 days, you've shown me more truth and beauty than I've seen in 20 years in this industry. Because when you sing, the world makes sense again. And because... He hesitated, then decided to be completely honest. Because I've fallen in love with you, Pietra, with your courage, with your music, with your pure soul. And I'm not going to let anyone destroy that. The kiss that followed was inevitable, soft, desperate, full of promises and fears. When they parted, they both knew there was no turning back. Gabriel, Pietra whispered, if we stay together, it won't just be about enduring the scandal. It will be about raising a child that isn't yours, facing my destroyed family, dealing with a world that will never accept us. Then so be it, Gabriel replied, kissing her forehead. We'll face all of that together. But neither of them knew that, at that very moment, Helena Sterling was in an office in downtown, signing a contract with the most ruthless investigative journalist in the country, and that, in 48 hours, their lives would be exposed in ways that neither Gabriel nor Pietra ever imagined possible. Monday morning arrived with the force of a hurricane. Gabriel woke up to the phone ringing incessantly and Caroline banging desperately on his bedroom door. Pietra was still asleep in the next room, finally resting after 2 days of constant tension. Gabriel, Caroline shouted from the hallway, you need to see this now. He opened the door, finding his assistant with a pale face and several newspapers in her hands. The headline of the biggest tabloid in the country screamed in bold letters, "Music mogul in scandal with daughter of corrupt politician, pregnant woman blackmailing Gabriel Sterling." "It's not possible," Gabriel murmured, snatching the newspaper from Caroline's hands. The story was devastating. Photos of them entering the hospital, entering his house, even a grainy photo of Pietra singing in the park. But the worst was on the inside pages. Supposed WhatsApp conversations between Pietra and Rodrigo, where she allegedly said that she had found a big fish and that the sucker Gabriel is going to pay for everything. "This is false," Gabriel said, but his voice lacked conviction. The messages were too convincing, too detailed. "Gabriel," Caroline said carefully, "there's more. They found out she's been using the fake name for months, and that her father isn't just corrupt. He was involved in money laundering through the music industry, exactly our sector." Gabriel's blood ran cold. If the IRS investigated a possible connection between him and Eduardo Santos through Pietra, they would find irregularities that could completely destroy Sterling Music Group. The phone rang. It was his lawyer, Mr. David Stern. "Gabriel, I need to talk to you urgently. The FBI just issued a search warrant for your company. They're investigating possible money laundering linked to the Santos scandal." Gabriel felt the world collapse. "How is this possible?" "Someone provided information that you are romantically involved with Pietra Santos and that you may be using your company to launder her father's money. The evidence includes recent bank transfers to medical accounts in her name." "I paid for a doctor. That's not a crime." "No, but in the current context it looks suspicious. Gabriel, you need to distance yourself from her immediately, publicly." When Gabriel hung up, Pietra was standing in the doorway of the room, wearing one of his robes, her face destroyed. She had heard everything. I saw the newspapers," she said, her voice broken. "Caroline showed me." Gabriel approached, but she recoiled. "Pietra, you know this is all a lie." "Is it?" she asked, and there was such deep pain in her eyes that Gabriel felt his heart shatter. "Because those messages, they sound exactly like something I would say if I were the kind of person they say I am. But you're not." "How can you be sure?" Pietra cried, tears flowing freely. "You've known me for a week, 1 week, Gabriel, and in that week you've spent thousands of dollars on me, brought me to your house, promised to take care of my son. How do you know I'm not exactly what they're saying?" The question hit Gabriel like a punch. For a terrible moment, he remembered Isabella, how he had been deceived before, how his judgment became clouded when he felt something for someone. "Because I trust you," he said, but the hesitation in his voice was enough for Pietra to notice. "You hesitated," she whispered. "You hesitated, Gabriel." "Pietra, no, no," she interrupted, straightening her shoulders with a dignity that broke his heart. "It's okay to have doubts. I would too if I were you." The phone rang again. Caroline answered and then approached with a grave expression. "Gabriel, it's your mother. She says she's downstairs and she's coming up." Gabriel closed his eyes. "Pietra, go to the room, please." "No, if we're going to face this, firmly, we'll face it together." But before Gabriel could answer, the front door burst open. Helena Sterling entered like a storm, her heels echoing on the marble of the hall. She was an imposing woman of 60, dressed like an executive who had just left a war room. "Gabriel," she said, completely ignoring Pietra, "I hope you've had time to reflect on your situation." "Mom, I present Pietra Santos," Gabriel said, placing himself protectively beside her. Helena finally looked at Pietra, and the contempt in her eyes was palpable. "Ah, the famous blackmailer. I must admit, you're smarter than the others. Getting pregnant was a clever move." "I am not a blackmailer," Pietra said, her voice firm despite the tremor in her hands. "No?" Helena smiled coldly, withdrawing a folder from her bag. "Then explain this." She spread a series of documents on the coffee table, bank statements, printed conversations, even photos of Pietra with Rodrigo months before. But what made Gabriel's blood run cold was seeing documents from Sterling Music Group, confidential contracts, financial information that only someone inside the company could have accessed. "I discovered something interesting investigating your new protege," Helena continued. "Rodrigo Almeida, the baby's father, works for a law firm that represents our biggest competitors. And those leaked conversations, they were strategically placed in the press after you two got involved." Gabriel picked up the documents, examining them with growing horror. It means you were targeted from the beginning," Helena concluded triumphantly. "The girl may even be innocent, a pawn in the game, but you're being used to destroy our company." Pietra looked at the documents, trying to understand. "I didn't know any of this. Rodrigo never told me where he worked exactly." "Of course you didn't know," Helena said with false compassion. "You were just the perfect bait. A beautiful, talented, pregnant and vulnerable girl. Exactly the type my son has always had a weakness for." Gabriel slowly moved away from Pietra, the documents trembling in his hands. You really didn't know about Rodrigo?" "Gabriel, I swear on my son's life that I didn't know any of this," but the seed of doubt had already been planted. Gabriel remembered how Pietra had appeared exactly in the right place, at the right time, when he needed inspiration the most. How she had accepted his help relatively easily, despite claiming to be distrustful. "Even if you didn't know," Helena continued mercilessly, "the result is the same. The FBI already has grounds to open a formal investigation. The shareholders are in a panic. If you continue with her, Sterling Music Group will go bankrupt in 6 months. Gabriel's phone vibrated with an urgent message from the legal department. "We need to talk urgently. Critical situation." Pietra saw the change in Gabriel's face, saw the exact moment he began to distance himself emotionally from her. "You're doubting me," she said, her voice broken. Gabriel couldn't finish the sentence. "It's okay," Pietra said, getting up with difficulty. "I understand. I really understand." She walked towards the door but stopped. "I just want you to know that everything I felt for you was real. The music, the conversations last night, everything was real." "Pietra, wait." "No," she said without turning around. "Your mother is right about one thing. You have to choose between your company and me. And we both know what the right choice is." Helena watched with satisfaction as Pietra left the house. "You made the smart choice, son. I didn't choose anything," Gabriel said, feeling as if his heart was being ripped from his chest. "Yes, you did. You chose to preserve everything we built together." Helena approached, placing her hand on his shoulder. "In a few months, you'll realize it was the right decision." But Gabriel couldn't take his eyes off the door where Pietra had disappeared. For the first time in years, he had found something real, genuine, that made his life meaningful. And he had let it slip through his fingers like sand. Outside, Pietra walked slowly down the street, one hand supporting her belly, the other wiping away the tears that wouldn't stop falling. She had lost Gabriel, but even worse, she had lost the hope that someone could love her for who she really was, with all her baggage and all her painful truths. What neither of them knew was that Rodrigo was watching everything from a car parked on the corner, a satisfied smile on his face. The first phase of the plan had worked perfectly. Now it was time for the second phase, and this time he would recover Pietra and the baby, along with a share in the profits that this whole situation would guarantee him. A week had passed since Pietra had left Gabriel's mansion, and she found herself back in the small rented apartment, surviving on the savings she had managed to save from her days singing in the park. The pain of separation was physical, as if a part of her had been torn away, but the pain of deception was even worse. Discovering that she had been used as a pawn in a game she didn't even know existed left her furious and determined. "I won't be a victim again," she murmured to herself, caressing her belly. "Neither will I, nor you, my love." That's when her phone rang. It was an unknown number, but she answered. "Pietra, this is Marina Luce." The name didn't mean anything to her initially. "Sorry, but I'm an investigative journalist for Revelations magazine, and I'm also the Marina that Gabriel mentioned to you, the one who was destroyed by the Sterling family 20 years ago." Pietra felt her heart race. "How did you get my number?" "I have my methods. Listen, I saw the articles about you and Gabriel. I know exactly what Helena Sterling is doing because she did the same thing to me. Can we meet? I have information you need to know." 2 hours later, Pietra was sitting in a discreet coffee shop in downtown, facing a woman of approximately 45 years old, elegant but with eyes that carried old scars. "Helena Sterling is a functional sociopath," Marina said bluntly. "She won't stop until she's sure you've completely disappeared from Gabriel's life, and I have proof that she fabricated evidence against you." Marina opened a laptop and showed Pietra a series of files. "Those WhatsApp conversations that are supposedly yours, they were created using deepfake software. Rodrigo was paid to provide intimate details about you two to make the conversations convincing." Pietra felt a mixture of relief and revolt. "How did you find this out?" "Because Helena did the same thing to me 20 years ago. Only at the time there was no WhatsApp. She used fake letters and purchased witnesses." Marina closed the laptop. "The difference is that now I have the resources to fight back." "Why are you helping me?" Marina smiled sadly. "Because I know what it's like to love Gabriel Sterling and be destroyed for it. And because this time, maybe we can win." They spent the next few hours planning. Marina had spent years investigating Helena's methods, building a dossier on her manipulations. She had contacts in the media, knew the Sterling family's schemes. "Gabriel doesn't know any of this," Marina explained. "Helena has always been careful to make him think that his relationships ended naturally. He genuinely believes that both you and I are problematic. So how are we going to prove the truth? Rodrigo is our key. He was paid very well to participate in this scheme, but greedy men always want more. I'm going to make him an offer he can't refuse." Meanwhile, Gabriel found himself in his company, trying to control the damage. Sterling Music Group's shares had plummeted 30% in a week. Contracts were being cancelled. Artists were breaking partnerships. His professional life was collapsing, but all he could think about was Pietra. "You made the right choice," Helena repeated whenever she visited him. "In a few months, all of this will be a forgotten nightmare." But Gabriel couldn't forget the look of pain in Pietra's eyes when she left his house. He couldn't stop thinking about the last song she had sung to him, about finding light in the darkness. On Thursday night, Gabriel made a desperate decision. He drove to Pietra's apartment, climbed the 3 flights of stairs of a rundown building, and knocked on the door. Pietra opened it, her eyes swollen from crying. "Gabriel, what are you doing here?" "I need to know the truth," he said. "From your mouth, looking me in the eyes." "What truth? Did you use me? Was it all a plan to blackmail me?" The question hurt more than any newspaper headline. Pietra stared him directly in the eye. "No, never. I fell in love with you, Gabriel. For real. But Rodrigo betrayed me in ways I never imagined were possible," she said, the anger growing in her voice. "But I'm going to prove it. I'm going to prove that I was used just as much as you were." "How?" "I don't know yet. But I will find out." She put her hand on the door, ready to close it. "Gabriel, do you believe me?" Gabriel looked at her. Really looked at her. He saw the woman who had sung in the park with an open heart, who had worried about his well-being even while in labor, who had offered to fight alongside him even though she was the most vulnerable part of the equation. "I believe you," he said, and this time there was no hesitation in his voice. "Then give me a week, 1 week to prove that we are victims, not criminals. And if you can't," Pietra touched her belly, where the baby was moving restlessly, "then you two will be better off without me anyway." Gabriel was about to protest when he saw a familiar car parked down the street. Rodrigo was there watching them. When he realized he had been seen, he waved with an arrogant smile and started the car, disappearing into the night. "He was watching us," Gabriel said, a dangerous coldness taking over his voice. "He's been watching me for days," Pietro revealed. "He showed up here the day before yesterday, saying he wants to talk about the baby's future, that he has a proposal to make to me." Gabriel felt a murderous rage grow in his chest. "What kind of proposal?" "I don't know. He said he'd call me on Friday." Gabriel turned to leave, but Pietro grabbed him by the arm. "Where are you going?" "To have a conversation with Rodrigo." "No," she said firmly. "If you do that, it will look like we're conspiring together. Let him call on Friday. Let him show his cards." Gabriel took a deep breath, forcing himself to calm down. "Are you sure?" "I am, because on Friday we're going to find out exactly what Rodrigo wants, and we're going to record every word." They looked at each other, and for the first time in a week there was hope in the air. They didn't know how yet, but they were going to fight together. Friday arrived loaded with tension. Pietra had installed a recording app on her cell phone, following Marina's instructions, who was strategically positioned in a nearby cafe, ready to intervene if necessary. Gabriel waited in his office, pretending to work, but with every fiber of his being concentrated on what was about to happen. At 3 in the afternoon, Rodrigo called. Pietra activated the recording and answered with a controlled voice. "Hi, Rodrigo." "Pietra, my love." His voice dripped with false sweetness. "I hope you've had time to think about our situation." "Our situation?" "Well, the baby is my son, and you're involved with a very rich man who's in a delicate situation. I thought we could find a solution that would benefit all of us." Pietra closed her eyes, forcing herself to stay calm. "What kind of solution?" "Simple. You come back to me, we get married before the baby is born, and I stop providing information about Gabriel Sterling to those who are interested in destroying him." The confession fell like a bomb. "You admit you're providing information?" Rodrigo laughed. "Pietra, you've always been naive. Do you think it was a coincidence that I disappeared exactly when you needed me most? Do you think it was a coincidence that you found Gabriel Sterling in the park? It was all orchestrated. By whom? By very powerful people who wanted Sterling Music Group out of the way. I was paid to date you, get you pregnant, and then disappear. The plan was for you to be desperate, vulnerable, exactly the type of woman Gabriel Sterling has always had a weakness for." Pietra felt nauseous. "You used me from the beginning? And you fell in love so easily," Rodrigo continued cruelly. "It was almost pathetic. But the plan changed when I realized how much Sterling fell for you. Now I can earn a lot more." "How?" "He'll pay any amount for me to disappear with these recordings I have of him confessing that he knew about your father from the beginning. Recordings that show him planning to use you to launder money through your musical career. Those recordings don't exist because that never happened." "They do exist, my dear. Technology these days works miracles." Rodrigo paused. "So what's it going to be? Come back to me and our son is born into a united family? Or Gabriel Sterling loses everything and you raise our baby alone and poor?" Pietra hung up the phone with her hands shaking with anger. She immediately called Marina. "Did you get everything?" Marina asked. "I did. He confessed everything." "Perfect. Now let's move on to phase 2. An hour later, Marina arrived at Pietra's apartment with state-of-the-art equipment. "I'm going to teach you how to use this," she said, showing a small recorder. "Rodrigo will want to meet in person to close the deal, and when that happens, we'll have everything we need." Saturday night, Rodrigo asked to meet Pietra at an elegant restaurant. She arrived 20 minutes late, wearing the only dress that still fit her, with the recorder hidden in her purse. "You look beautiful," Rodrigo said, kissing her hand as if they were lovers reuniting. "Pregnancy has made you even more beautiful." "Let's get straight to the point," Pietra said, sitting down. "What exactly do you want?" Rodrigo smiled. "First you. back. We get married next week in a small but well-documented ceremony. Second, Gabriel Sterling pays $5 million for me to destroy the fake recordings and stop providing information about him. And if he doesn't pay, then on Sunday I'm going to the press with evidence that he knew about your father from the beginning and planned to use you to launder money. Sterling Music Group will go bankrupt, and Gabriel may even be arrested. Pietra forced herself to ask, "What about Helena Sterling? Is she involved in this?" Rodrigo laughed. "Helena? She's just an overprotective mother who hired incompetent investigators. The real masterminds are the international competitors who want to buy Sterling Music for a fraction of the value." Helena thought she was protecting her son, but she was actually doing exactly what they wanted. The revelation was even worse than Pietra had imagined. Helena had been manipulated too, just like all of them. "You have 1 hour to decide," Rodrigo said, getting up. "After that, the price goes up." When he left, Pietra immediately called Marina. "We have everything." He confessed everything. "Perfect. Now let's go to Gabriel." Gabriel was in his empty office at Sterling Music Group when Marina and Pietra arrived. He looked at Pietra with a mixture of hope and pain that broke her heart. "Marina," he said, recognizing the woman he had loved 20 years before. "What are you doing here?" "Saving you from repeating the same mistakes," Marina replied, placing a recorder on the table. "Listen to this." During the next 15 minutes, Gabriel listened to Rodrigo confess the entire conspiracy. He saw how he had been manipulated, how Pietra had been used, how his own mother had been deceived. When the recordings ended, Gabriel was pale. "My God, Pietra, you believed what seemed obvious," she said softly. "I don't blame you. I abandoned you when you needed me most, and now you have the chance to make up for it," Marina interrupted. "Rodrigo wants an answer in 40 minutes. And there's more. He's scheduled a press conference for Sunday, where he's going to expose the false evidence if you don't pay." Gabriel stood up, determination replacing regret. "Then let's give him exactly what he wants." "What do you mean?" Pietra asked. "We're going to pay what he's asking for, and we're going to do it in front of the cameras." Marina smiled. "You've learned to play dirty." "No," Gabriel corrected, looking at Pietra. "I've learned to fight for what I love." On Sunday, the press conference that Rodrigo had scheduled gained national proportions. All the major networks were present, expecting the promised scandal. Rodrigo arrived confidently, wearing a new suit and carrying a folder full of evidence. But when he stepped up to the podium, he found Gabriel and Pietra already waiting, side by side, with Marina strategically positioned among the journalists. "Rodrigo Almeida," Gabriel said into the microphone, his voice echoing through the packed auditorium. "You said you had evidence against me. I'm here to hear it." Rodrigo hesitated, surprised by their presence. "Gabriel, I thought we had agreed to resolve this privately." "We changed our minds," Pietra said, taking the microphone. "We want the whole country to hear your evidence." Rodrigo began to present the false WhatsApp conversations, the accusations of blackmail, the alleged connections to money laundering. But when he finished, Gabriel approached the microphone. "Very interesting," he said calmly. "Now we want everyone to hear this." Marina activated a sound system connected to the auditorium's speakers. Rodrigo's voice echoed clearly, confessing the entire conspiracy, admitting to being paid to seduce and abandon Pietra, revealing how the evidence was fabricated. The auditorium exploded in murmurs. Rodrigo turned livid, trying to deny it, but the evidence was irrefutable. "In addition," Gabriel continued, "we discovered that the companies that orchestrated this attack are being investigated by the FBI for attempted manipulation of the international entertainment market." Helena Sterling, who had arrived minutes before, hoping to see her son finally get rid of Pietra, was now pale in the front row, realizing how she had been used. Gabriel turned to Pietra, taking her hand in front of all the cameras. "Pietra Santos, you taught me what true music is. You taught me what true love is. You taught me that it's worth fighting for those we love." He knelt before her, pulling a ring from his pocket. Not an elaborate engagement ring, but a simple and beautiful ring that he had bought that morning. "Marry me. Let me be the father your son deserves and the husband you deserve." Pietra looked at him through her tears, then at the cameras, then at Helena Sterling, who was now crying with regret in the front row. "Only if you promise me one thing," she said. "Anything. Promise that we'll raise our son away from all this circus. That we'll be a real family, simple and real." Gabriel smiled, kissing her hand. "I promise. And I also promise that I'll spend the rest of my life making up for this week." "Yes," she whispered, and then shouted for all to hear, "Yes, I do!" The auditorium exploded in applause. Rodrigo was arrested right there for extortion and forgery. Helena Sterling approached the couple, tears in her eyes. "Pietra," she said, her voice choked, I was terribly wrong about you. Can you forgive me?" Pietra looked at the woman who had tried to destroy her, then at Gabriel, who was awaiting her answer with his heart in his throat. "Family is about forgiveness," she said finally, "and about second chances." 6 months later, Gabriel and Pietra were married in an intimate ceremony in the garden of the mansion, surrounded only by people who really mattered. Marina was the maid of honor. Helena Sterling held the baby, a healthy boy who had been born with his stepfather's dark eyes and his mother's strength. On their wedding night, while the baby slept in the crib next to the bed, Pietra gently sang to Gabriel the same song she had sung in the park on the day they met. But now the words spoke of light found, of love won, of family built on truth and forgiveness. Gabriel kissed her when she finished singing, knowing that he had found not only the love of his life, but his redemption. And Pietra, nestled in his arms, knew that all the suffering had been worth it to get to that perfect moment. Outside, the city of New York continued its frenetic dance, but inside that house, 3 hearts beat in perfect harmony, proving that true love always finds a way, even when the whole world tries to stop it.